Good morning and welcome to the joint meeting of the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means and the Senate Committee on Finance. Committee Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Senator Cannizzaro, Senator Dondero Loop, Senator Goycochea, Senator Harris, Senator Neal, Senator Wynn, Senator Severs-Gansert, Senator Titus, Assemblywoman Anderson, Assemblywoman Backus, Assemblywoman Brown-May, Assemblywoman Dickman, Assemblywoman Gorlow, Assemblyman Hafen, Assemblywoman Howdegi, Assemblywoman Kasama, Assemblyman Miller, Assemblyman O'Neill, Assemblywoman Peters, Assemblyman Watts, Assemblyman Yeager, Chair Monroe Moreno.
And I am here. Will you please mark Senator Cannizzaro and Senator Neal present when they arrive? Members, we have 3 budget presentations today, but before we get started, I'd like to welcome those of you that are joining us here in the audience in Carson City. I don't see anyone in the room in Las Vegas yet, but I'm sure we'll probably have one before this day is over, and those of you that are joining us online. I'd ask that you please silence all of your electronic devices. If you wish to testify, I'll ask that you sign in at the tables by the door. Give your business card to the secretaries before leaving the audience. When you do testify, please press the button and state and spell your name for the record and any affiliations that you're here to represent. I expect courtesy and respect in all of our interactions during today's meeting. Even if you disagree with someone, we can be polite while being disagreeable. Committee members will be using their laptops, so please don't take that as a sign of disrespect. They'll be following along with the agenda and some of the handouts on their laptops. Public comment will be at the end of today's meeting. The public comment will be limited to just 2 minutes, and please be mindful because we may have a lot of people who would like to make public comment. So, with that, we will move on to our first budget presentation. It will be the Governor's Office of Science and Innovation and Technology, Budget 1003. And I welcome you to the table. As soon as you get situated, you can start at any time. And good morning.
Good morning, members of the committee and Madam Chair. My name is Brian Mitchell, the Director of the Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology in the Office of the Governor. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Happy President's Day. With me here, I have Tracy Howard, who is our STEM Program Director, and then also Daniel Marlowe from the Administrative Services Division, who will take all of the hard questions from you today. I have a fairly lengthy presentation for you, but as much as I would love to spend all day talking about the things that we do, I know all of you have better things to do and would probably not like to hear me all day. So I'll go through things fairly quickly in the presentation, but there's some information in there that if you have specific questions, we can come back and take a deeper dive into anything that you'd like. Our statutory authority can be and where we are can be found in NRS 223. And our mission, we have a twofold mission, or at OSIT. The first is related to STEM education and workforce development, and that's to coordinate the efforts of both K-12 and higher education to ensure that the students and the both in K-12 and in our college system have the skills that they need in order so that Nevada can meet the needs of its growing and expanding STEM workforce and STEM economy. On the broadband side, our mission is really to ensure that every Nevadan has access to a high-speed internet connection that is reliable and affordable and scalable. These are among the objectives that are a part of our budget. The organizational chart is we're a small but mighty team, and we'll talk a little bit more about the things that we do in our work. The kind of, if I were to summarize the activities that we do, it would fall into one of these 5 buckets. So STEM workforce development, which includes both workforce, direct workforce of students who are in our university system, as well as workforce development for our educators, who are really kind of the first line of helping our students get the interest and awareness of STEM, different STEM careers that are possible for them. Then STEM education is our second bucket. Our third bucket is we run the state graduate medical education grant program to help train more doctors and physicians in our state. The next bucket is digital equity, which I'll talk a little bit more about today. And finally, broadband infrastructure development. Let's see, I'd like to talk a little bit about STEM education and take a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the STEM initiatives that we do. So as I mentioned before, developing teacher knowledge and capacity in STEM is at the core of what we do. So we do a lot of professional development. The next thing we do is we want to create school ecosystems where students have an opportunity to learn STEM in an integrated environment. And so we have the Governor's STEM School program where schools can apply for that designation. We do a lot of both high school and college programs that result in STEM workforce credentials, and do a lot of collaboration with industry to ensure that the programs that the state offers meets the needs that they have. So within our budget category 10, our STEM grants category, we have a couple of different programs that we do. Our STEM Workforce Challenge Grants is kind of our flagship program that provides middle skills STEM post-secondary workforce training programs that meet the needs of employers. Then we have STEM Workforce Talent Pipeline Grants, which is a program I'm really excited about, and that is kind of a bridge program between high school and college where students can take classes in high school and continue without that gap between their senior year. And we try to keep kids in the system so that they are able to then graduate with a industry recognized credential. We fund regional STEM networks throughout the state. We have a STEM Leaders Academy, which is a program for schools that are interested in becoming a governor's STEM school but have not quite made it there yet. And then finally, our Engineering Fellows program provides opportunities for teachers to collaborate with professional engineers to bring more engineering design into the classroom. We also have a pilot program right now for a STEM teacher certification that we're really excited about. We've partnered with a group called NICE, and they're very nice, and they provide, and they're helping us to build out this pilot program. And then finally, as I mentioned before, our designated STEM schools. Relatedly, in category 22, is our K-5 STEM grant program. And this we have two different sub-programs within this. One is a classroom grant, and then the other is a whole school grant. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in just a second. But the idea is to kind of get schools started with providing STEM experiences to their kids. And this is primarily focused on elementary school. I know that there's a lot of really great programs at the high school level that provide, career and technical education and other things like that. But if you don't get kids interested in STEM when they're in elementary school, it's tougher to get somebody interested later on. All right, here's some of the information about our awards thus far in the biennium for the STEM Workforce Challenge Grant. Over the last 8 years, we've awarded 38 programs in IT and cybersecurity, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, construction, aviation, and unmanned aerial systems. And others. We are continuing, we have an open grant or an open RFP right now and expect to make further awards throughout the rest of the biennium. And also happy to talk about any of these in more detail if you're interested. The next is our STEM Workforce Talent Pipeline Program. Again, this is kind of the program that starts in high school and then continues through to just beyond high school. And so with this program, we require a high school and a community college or other workforce partner and an employer together to submit a joint application, wherein the students take college credit starting in high school and finish up just after high school, and then our workforce partner or our employer partner guarantees a job interview to everyone who completes the program. And so that's a pretty good incentive when you have someone like Tesla offering interviews to anybody who can complete your program. So we've awarded a few so far this year and are continuing to make awards. The 3 regional STEM networks operate kind of similar to the RDAs that GOED has. These networks identify on-the-ground programmatic gaps, and then they have a strategic plan in each of the regions, and then we provide some funding for different STEM organizations within the region to address the different gaps that the regional committees have identified. Here are the examples of the awards that we have 3 regions, one in the Northwest, one in Southern Nevada, and then one in rural Nevada, and these are the applications that we funded thus far. Our STEM Leaders Academy, as I mentioned before, is our opportunity for teachers and school administrators to come, and it's a year-long intensive training program that's run by Ms. Howard to my left. And this program provides an opportunity for every school to understand what a holistic STEM education is. It's open to K-12 school, any K-12 school in the state, and we take them through a strategic planning process, and then at the very end they receive a grant to be able to implement their plan. And so these are the schools and the students that have participated thus far this year. Here's some information about our STEM teacher certification pilot. And I think we view this opportunity as a way for if a school might not be quite ready to be a STEM school, but there's oftentimes a couple of teachers who are really interested in STEM. And so we view them as being kind of future anchors at a school that might become a STEM school in a couple of years. And this is an opportunity for individual teachers to start having STEM experiences in their classrooms, and then be able to kind of be that foundation of a future STEM school. Here are the designated STEM schools from this past year. We were very pleased to have 8 schools and about 7,500 students participate in our designated STEM school grant. And we're continuing to accept applications for funding for these students. All right, finally, our K-5 STEM grant. As I mentioned before, this is a grant that's focused on elementary schools. Try to get the kiddos there to be able to have STEM experiences early on so that they become more interested in what's going on with STEM, so that when they get to high school, they're ready and prepared to participate in some of the more CTE kind of programs that we offer. And so individual teachers can apply for a grant of up to $1,500 to provide either equipment or materials and supplies for a STEM-related lesson. And then an entire school can apply for a $20,000 grant. And what we've seen is that this K-5 STEM grant program has been a catalyst for schools that have eventually gone through our STEM Leaders Academy. So they start out kind of, with a teacher or two applying for a classroom grant, and then the school applies for a whole school grant. And then another year down the road, once they've seen kind of the benefits of STEM education for themselves, then they're interested in becoming a STEM school. All right. Madam Chair, would you like me to just keep going, or? Okay. I'd like to shift focus now away from STEM to broadband. So with broadband, as I mentioned before, our mission and our objective is, and this comes from the Biden-Harris administration, is universal access. So when we say universal access, we really mean 100% of Nevadans having access to an affordable, reliable, scalable, high-speed internet connection. And in order to do that, we'll need to have a lot of collaboration with communities, as well as being very efficient and effective with the funds that we have. The amount of funding that we have is significant, but when we look at the costs and the need that we have throughout the state, we know that it won't be sufficient, and therefore we're going to have to leverage a lot of different funding sources, and I'll talk through those today about how we plan to do that. This chart here represents I think it's 14 different funding sources that we're tracking right now and that we intend to leverage for broadband. Along the x-axis is the degree of state discretion for where and how funds are spent, and then on the y-axis is the level of state control over who receives the funding. And so as you can see, kind of the funds in the upper right corner, the state has more control over, whereas funds over and kind of in the bottom left either have more restrictions or are or are designated towards certain individuals or populations. The funds are color coordinated according to the funding source. So green are state funds. The orange are ARPA funds. The blue ones are IIJA funds. And then the gray ones are other federal funding programs. So I'll just briefly walk you through each one of these. The first is the State Fiscal Recovery Fund. And this was $203 million that was allocated from the State Fiscal Recovery Fund account last year. We have an obligation deadline of 2024 and an expenditure deadline of 2026, both of which we will have no problem meeting. Our plan for these funds is we've divided the fund into three different subcategories. The first is roughly a little over $100 million for the first phase of the High Speed Nevada initiative. The second is a matching fund for the BEAD program, which I'll explain a little bit later. And then the third is we've earmarked about $10 million for tribal connectivity. Our tribal nations are among the most rural and remote and most unconnected communities in the state. So in phase one of the High Speed Nevada initiative, this middle map here, we identified over 1,000 state and local facilities throughout the state, and that we believe are underserved, and we plan to build broadband infrastructure to those facilities. So these can be schools, there might be libraries, might be a state government facility or a local government facility, or other community anchor institution. And while it's important to build infrastructure to these facilities for government purposes, at the same time, it's what we really want. The bigger picture is that we're building fiber infrastructure into communities where that are underserved today. And so, if you look on the to the map to the right, the red dots represent broadband serviceable locations that are underserved today, and the facilities that we've identified are adjacent to many of these communities. So the phase one will occur in every county of the state and nearly every community. So what we did was we identified these facilities, and then we divided them up into 10 regions in the state, which is the map on the left. And then we had a competitive grant opportunity for these facilities, and we bid out to get the best pricing for each facility. And that's a process that's ongoing right now, and we hope to make awards for these sometime this spring. But again, the idea here is that, to the extent we can, we want to be able to, in phase one, build fiber into the community so that in subsequent phases of the High-Speed Nevada Initiative, we'll be able to build to individual residential and business locations that are unserved or underserved today. As a part of phase one of the High-Speed Nevada Initiative, certainly $100 or so million is a lot of money, but it's not enough in order to reach every community. And so we need to leverage other federal programs that are available for these types of initiatives. So the next two funding sources I want to talk to you about are the E-rate and rural healthcare programs. These are programs that are run by the Federal Communications Commission from the Universal Service Fund and have been ongoing since the mid-90s. These are programs that the state has taken advantage of in the past, and in our budget is a state matching fund for E-rate. We've connected 30-something schools and built over 1,800 miles of fiber using this program. And we've been able to leverage, usually around 9 to 1, the federal funding that comes in. So what you'll notice in this table here is that the state funds, $4 million in our budget, is going to, we estimate, will leverage approximately $82 million in federal E-rate funding. And that we'll use to be able to connect schools and libraries in unserved communities throughout the state. So the total ARPA funding from the State Fiscal Recovery Fund is a little over $100 million, and we expect there to be roughly equal federal match when we use that through the E-rate program. So again, this is about using multiple funding sources and braiding them together in a way that's efficient as possible so that we can get more fiber to more people. The next one I'll highlight for you is the NTIA Middle Mile Grant Program. This is a competitive grant. There was $1 billion available nationwide, and NTIA is the administrator of that program. NTIA is the National Telecommunications and Information Administration within the Department of Commerce. And we submitted a grant request for $87 million. I think, obviously I'm biased, but I think we have a pretty good application. We'll see what happens. NTIA announced that they got about $5 billion in requests for this $1 billion pot, so it's extremely competitive. But if we're able to if we are funded, then we'll build a total of 431 miles of middle mile fiber, and that will directly serve about 21,500 unserved locations throughout the state. The next one I'll talk about is the Capital Projects Fund. This was a fund of $135 million that the state received. It was a part of a $10 billion broadband-specific fund from the U.S. Department of the U.S. Department of Treasury. And those funds have the same obligation and expenditure deadlines as the other funding from ARPA. So our plan for this funding that we've submitted to Treasury is we've divided it into two different pots of money. The first, or two different programs. First one that was just announced as approved last month that I'm really excited about is a program that focuses on low-income multi-dwelling units. As we did as we've done outreach and engagement in every community of the state, one of the things that we've found is that low-income areas oftentimes have less modern infrastructure than other places, and folks there are less well connected than Nevadans as a whole. And so the folks that are most vulnerable among us to the digital divide, we wanted to start first with them. And so this low-income multi-dwelling unit program, we've identified through our partners in the 3 Nevada housing authorities, over 450 properties that contain 40,000 or so units. And so we're going to invest $55 million in bringing fiber to all of these individual units. We are currently working with the housing authorities now to develop the program and hope to launch an RFP sometime this spring, and then this summer make funding decisions and get started with the construction there. So really, one thing that's really exciting is the folks that live in these places will have the best and fastest internet in the state, sometime over the next 2 to 3 years. The other half of the funding is still under review by Treasury, and we had put about $73 million towards rural broadband infrastructure. So that program's under review, and hope to hear back from Treasury sometime in the next 8 weeks or so. All right, moving on to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The largest funding source in IIJA is the BEAD fund. BEAD stands for Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, guaranteed $100 million. And then the remainder of the fund will be allocated based on each state's proportion of the total number of unserved locations in that state as compared to the national total. So, so we can expect, based on some estimates that some really smart people have done, somewhere between a $250 and $400 million total of funding. We're guaranteed $100 million, and then based on the formula allocation, it might be another $150 to $300 million. The purpose of this fund is to serve last mile unserved locations. So we have kind of an order of operations where we have to ensure that every unserved location in the state can be served, and then we can move on to underserved locations. It's a fairly lengthy time frame. I oftentimes get the question, when are you going to bring better connectivity to my house? And there's definitely a process with this fund. So the state right now we're working on our 5-year BEAD action plan, which we have to submit to the federal government, and that includes a lot of community engagement. And so we are going to be in your communities even more so than we have been thus far. Once we've submitted our 5-year action plan, the NTIA will release the allocation for every state's BEAD fund on June 30th. So that's, if you're wondering when we're going to know how much money we're going to get for BEAD, it'll be every state's going to find out on June 30th. And at that point, that starts a 180-day clock for us to submit our initial proposal for how those funds will be spent, and that'll be based on the 5-year action plan that we do. Once the initial proposal has been submitted and reviewed and approved by the NTIA, that'll give us the green light to then begin to implement our proposal. We'll have access at that point to 20% of our BEAD allocation, and so we'll go through and implement our plan, and before we make any funding awards or actually put any shovels in the ground, we then have to submit a final proposal to NTIA, and which explains, what we did during the initial proposal phase. And once that gets approved, then NTIA will release the remaining 80% of our BEAD fund, and we'll be able to get started on projects, all of which we have to do before December 31st, 2026. When we talk about the allocation for the BEAD fund, I mentioned that it's based on the total number of unserved areas in Nevada over, that's the numerator, and then the denominator is the total number of unserved areas in the entire country. So how you know how many unserved areas you have is through the FCC's broadband map. This is kind of the one map to rule them all, and basically has every provider submit information about all the locations that they serve. So I have to be honest with you, we haven't been totally satisfied in the accuracy of the information on the map. And there is a challenge process that any individual or any state or local government or any entity, can submit challenges to the map. Thus far, we've submitted over 26,000 location challenges. So the little map that you see on the left with all the green dots are locations that we believed were missing from the map and therefore weren't counted in our allocation. And we submitted those successfully to the FCC, and they added them into the next to the current version of the map. We've also submitted over 20,000 of what are called availability challenges, where everybody agrees that the location exists, but a provider has said that they provide service there and we disagree. And so there's a process that states and each of you could log into the map and say, look at who's providing service at your house, and then say whether or not you agree with that. And so we've submitted over 20,000 challenges to the map, and if we're successful, that would mean that that locations that are currently showing up as served would then show up as unserved, and then we would receive more BEAD money to be able to serve those locations. So every state is doing this. I think there's going to be kind of a big shuffle between now and June 30th, when the NTIA will say, all right, the map's good enough, and we're going to go ahead and allocate the funding. One thing I want to say is that we've been very active with our two Senate offices, U.S. Senate offices, who have been extremely amazing and wonderful advocates for us on the federal level, working with the FCC and NTIA to help ensure that Nevada gets its fair share of the funding and that the map is as accurate as it can be. So I want to make sure that I thank them here. All right, moving on. There are a number of different funding sources for broadband funding sources for our tribal nations. We have 28 of them in Nevada. So I'll talk just really briefly about each one. The NTIA Tribal Broadband Connectivity Grant is a grant that bypasses the state and goes directly from NTIA to the tribes. And we have so far helped 16 tribes receive about $32.9 million from that fund. And we're really excited for each one of those opportunities. In the State Fiscal Recovery Fund, we've reserved $10 million, as I mentioned earlier, for tribes. With a partnership with the Attorney General's office, thank you, Mr. Attorney General, there's also $10 million in OSIT's budget from a settlement with T-Mobile, and that funding that was earmarked for tribal broadband. And then finally, to the extent if there's need for continued need for tribal broadband, we can use BEAD funds as well. And so what we'd like to do kind of in an order of operations is help as many tribes as possible continue to apply for round 2 of the NTIA Tribal Broadband Connectivity Grant. That's the competitive grant that's available nationwide. So let's try to get as much money of that. And then for tribes that aren't successful there, then we have several different state funding sources, starting with the State Fiscal Recovery Fund that we can use. So we're going to use our flexible dollars last and try to go after funding from the national competitive funding sources first in order to bring as much money as we can into the state. Below, you'll see the list of tribes that have been awarded thus far. So I think we've been successful here, but we have a lot of work to do. Final thing I want to talk about is digital equity, I think the infrastructure conversation sucks a lot of oxygen out of the room, and certainly you can't have broadband without infrastructure. But I want to stress that digital equity is just as important as infrastructure, and that even if even if someone has the fastest fiber connection to their house, if they can't afford it, then they're just as unconnected as they would be living anywhere, living in the middle of nowhere. So we have we're in the process of developing a statewide digital equity plan. We've received some federal funding that is funding the development of this plan. And again, this plan is going to be based extensively on local community engagement and outreach. So going to every community in the state, identifying the needs and of the populations that are there, determining what assets are in the community. And then we'll submit, and then we'll develop some strategies to meet the individual needs of the communities. We have received the planning funds for that, and once we submit our plan to the NTIA, they will review it, and if they agree, will then award us our capacity grant funding. And we anticipate that being in the range of about $18 to $20 million for capacity grants. And so that is I'm sure you've all been a part of planning processes where you spend a whole lot of time putting together a great plan and then it sits on the shelf and everybody moves on with their life. But the great thing that we tell communities about this particular planning process is that it will directly impact the funding that they receive in their community and how we expend funds. And so this planning process will lead to, or I guess unlock the implementation dollars that we have coming. And so with these implementation dollars, I don't anticipate the state using them to create a state digital equity office or the state actually implementing any of these programs. Rather, we would much rather work with local community partners like a library or a senior center or a community center. They already have relationships with the folks that need the digital equity training, and we'll be able to provide that information. So what does digital equity mean, and what are the kind of things that we can do with the funds? I like to think of digital equity as a three-legged stool, where one leg of the stool is affordability, the second is having a connected device, and then the third is having digital literacy or the digital skills needed to be able to use that device for more than just watching cat videos on YouTube. So, everything from telehealth and telemedicine for rural folks who would otherwise have to drive a long way to see a specialist, or job training, or looking for jobs online, or accessing either municipal or state government services online, et cetera. So those are the kind of things that we can use to provide with this funding. And that's what this slide talks about. Okay, we've created a couple of different maps related to digital equity that I just want to preview for you. These are all on our website. The first one on the left, kind of the purple one, is our digital distress index. And so the darker the purple, the more likely that community is to have to be adversely affected by the digital divide. So you'll see the top is the statewide map, and then the bottom ones are Las Vegas kind of blown up. And so you'll notice in Las Vegas, for example, there's some purple areas over here on the west side of town, but then there's some purple areas over here on the east side of town. And when you drill down and look at the data, the reasons why those areas are purple are quite different. So about 95% of the people that live in the census blocks over here are over the age of 65. And so very high senior population. Whereas on this side of town, it's a very high English language learner population, very high population of folks who haven't graduated from high school, higher population of folks living in poverty. So the kind of interventions and strategies that we need for this part of the map over here are going to be very different. And so this kind of information and data is going to be helpful as digital equity isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, but we're going to be very targeted in how we use the funds and what strategies we implement in which areas. The middle map here is related to what are called covered populations. The NTIA has asked us to focus on 8 different populations: rural folks, seniors, folks living in poverty, folks with disabilities, those who are recently incarcerated, and so on. There's a few more. And so this map maps the prevalence of each one of those populations in the communities. And so again, this is kind of going to help us target the funding where it's needed most. The final map over here is related to the Affordable Connectivity Program. This, for those of you who don't know, the Affordable Connectivity Program is a federal program run by the FCC that provides $30 a month subsidy for anyone who is below 200% of the federal poverty level. So if you qualify for Medicaid, SNAP, if you've got a kid in your house, the household that is on the school lunch program, if you received a Pell Grant, if you're on SSI, if you're a senior, or you receive rental assistance or energy assistance, you qualify for the program and can get $30 a month off of your internet service. And there are a number of providers in the state that provide a $30 a month plan so that folks can basically get a high quality internet service at no cost. I just want to give a shout out to 89101 that is leading the state with over 75% of the eligible households enrolled in the program. So the darker the color on the map, the higher the enrollment rate in ACP. So based on the not the total number of folks who are enrolled, but the rate for that. So there's I think Clark County in particular has been looked at by the FCC and a lot of national groups as a leader in getting folks enrolled in this program. All right. Finally, I'll just kind of skip this slide, but there are a couple other programs that are where providers or other folks are directly eligible for funding, and so we monitor these programs and provide technical assistance as needed or letters of support as other entities like providers apply for funding to bring broadband to the state. So again, trying to braid a number of different funding sources together in order to make sure that we serve everybody. All right. I've been talking for a long time. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We do have a few questions, and we are going to start with Assemblywoman Hadigi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have a question on Decision Unit E225. I know that you manage the graduate medical education program and that you're looking for about $200,000 for a new management analyst position. What kind of increased responsibilities necessitate this? Can you just give us some more detail as to exactly what this position will be doing and why it's required?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Hadigi. Brian Mitchell for the record. This new management analyst position is really critical for our office. For the last 8 years, we have managed the graduate medical education program and have basically done that without any additional staff. When the program was just ramping up, there was less work to do because we only had a few grantees at that point. As time has passed, we have grantees in the pipeline who are currently doing their programs. We have former grantees who have expended their funding, but that we still need to monitor to ensure that they're delivering on their obligations. And then we have new funding that would come in that we would need someone to manage the RFP process and make awards. So between that and then kind of some of the other increased responsibilities that we have with these broadband funds, we simply do not have the capacity right now to manage the program without another staff person. So this person would be wholly responsible for managing the program, and I've provided kind of a list of duties to your staff about what the person would do, both for the current grantees and ones in the past. And I think it's really important. One thing that during the pandemic we didn't have the opportunity to go and do as many site visits as we have in the past. And I think those site visits are really crucial to ensuring that the different applicants are staying on track with developing their programs.
If I could, one quick follow-up. Just one quick follow-up. No, and that answers my question, so thank you very much. Just, one other question. How did you guys come up with that salary? Was there a salary study done for that position?
Thank you for the question. We looked at the standard salary schedule for a similar person managing a similar amount of money, and that the dollar amount that you see there is what a similar position would make in another state agency.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. My question has to do with E275, and you spend a large amount of time on all the STEM education that's happening and everything. And I was just asking about the PBS Reno in particular with those PBS STEM Works Digital Shorts. Are there discussions about utilizing other areas of STEM that PBS Reno uses as well? And I know that also the Clark County schools use and or other groups that you're able to work with to try to expand those funds.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Anderson, for the question. I'm going to phone a friend and ask Tracy Howard, who manages that program, to respond.
Tracy Howard for the record. The PBS Reno grant was through our STEM network grant funding. They applied to create those videos and share them out with schools. And we have in the past also funded PBS Vegas for a similar project. And we do work with PBS Reno, PBS Vegas on different initiatives that we're involved with. As far as funding, they did come and apply for that, and so we don't have plans necessarily to expand on that since it was through a grant opportunity. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. I just want to make sure that PBS Vegas or Clark County is also being included in these items, because I know that PBS around the state has been incredibly helpful for our schools with these, and it's not just in the Washoe County area. So I wanted to make sure that both areas are in fact being identified.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
And Brian Mitchell, for the record, and I'll say I think we have funded PBS Vegas as well, and it is a competitive grant, but you know we've made inroads and have relationships there, and they're aware when funding opportunities are available.
Assemblywoman Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question also related to the STEM grant programs. And looking at the Workforce Development Grant Program, I know that there's a request for an increase both to the overall Workforce Development Grant Programs as well as the K through 5 programs. I was just wondering, you discussed the need for additional capacity to administer the GME program. Do you have the capacity to administer the increase in these grant programs as well, or are you going to have staffing challenges with that? And I guess specifically, do you see the increase for the various workforce development grants increasing the amount of applications and recipients that the program is going to receive, or do you see in some cases this just providing additional resources to some of the programs and recipients that have been identified?
Assemblyman Watts, Brian Mitchell for the record. Thanks for the question. So I want to say two things. So number one, a clarification that the funding that you'll see that looks like an increase is really just restoring the funding to the previously allocated amounts in the previous biennium. We during the pandemic, we had some of our awardees were unable to expend all of their funds due to staffing shortages at schools, and then there were some supply chain issues with some of the supplies they ordered where they didn't come in until after the fiscal year, so we were unable to expend. We paid the funds out of the following fiscal year funds, and so you'll see that the funding for that kind of that first base year of the budget was a little lower. So it's not so we're not asking for an expansion or additional money. It just because in the base year you only get what you spent. We're asking just to go back up to what we did before because of the unique situation that the pandemic did. So with regard to your second question about staffing, I think we feel pretty comfortable about the level of staffing we have for this particular part of the program. It's just the added work that the GME program had that, where we wanted to make that request.
Thank you. Senator Dundarrow.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Can you talk to us a little bit about the likelihood that OSIT would be able to expand the budget authority recommended if this funding were to be approved?
Senator Dundarrow, which funding are you speaking about?
In regard to the STEM programs, and you said that 33% of the budget authority in the STEM Workforce Development Grant Program and 20% of the K-5 was not expended. So can you talk to us a little bit about, expending that budget authority, recommending if this budget is approved?
Thank you for the question, Senator Dundarrow. The pandemic was really a unique opportunity or unique, I guess, situation where, in the past, we haven't had any problem expending the funds that have been appropriated to us. But I think there were issues with not being able to do the outreach visits that we typically do to schools and community colleges in the state, as well as just staffing challenges at the awardees that we did fund. So I think should the budget go back to the original amounts, I think you would see similar performance as to how we've done in previous biennia.
Okay, thank you very much. Follow up, Madam Chair. Go ahead. How closely do you work with the NDE on these K-12 budgets and programs that you do? Generally, we always think of things that happen in K-12 schools as being in the NDE. And so I was just curious how closely you work with them and if there's any expansion there, since it is an elementary, middle school, high school venue.
Thank you, Senator Dundarrow, for the question. Brian Mitchell for the record. We work very closely with NDE. They're a great partner of ours. So the NDE has a liaison in their organization to us, and this person sits on our review committees for grant applications, and also works very closely with our office on when we do governor-designated STEM school site visits. A representative from NDE is present, and so we're, so they're with us, and we do coordinate with them on the initiatives. They help us get the word out to schools about things that we're doing. I think we view ourselves as as kind of a special forces with a very specific mission, whereas NDE is kind of responsible more for the both the regulatory as well as kind of the holistic, well-rounded education that students get.
Thank you very much. And will it ever include STEAM, or will it always be STEM because it's in your department?
Thank you, Senator Dundarrow, for the question. Brian Mitchell for the record. STEM versus STEAM is the age-old debate that has been with us since the start. Our position is that good STEAM is STEM and vice versa, and we work with a number of STEAM schools and think STEAM absolutely has a big place in everything that we do. So we won't we don't try to discriminate or push schools away from STEAM. I think just in terms of branding, it can be difficult to have multiple different terms, and so like we generally refer to everything as STEM, but except when talking to a STEAM school. But certainly, absolutely think the arts has a very strong place in STEM.
Thank you very much.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to really give a shout out to the staff, because one of the concerns I always have is that we're leaving federal dollars on the table. And when I hear your overview and coordination of applying for all these federal grants, I'm just impressed. And also, you're submitting for the 26,000 in the fabric challenges. I mean, to just track all those and to do all those. And so I just wanted to thank the staff, because I think it's impressive, all the work you've been doing.
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. My question is relative to the broadband state match program funds, that piece. I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about what's the state match portion for the latest round of applications that you received?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Brown-May, for the question. Brian Mitchell, OSET for the record. So the state match is specific to funding related to the E-rate program. So E-rate is a federal program. It's everyone who has a cell phone. If you look at your bill, there's a tax on your bill that goes to the Universal Service Fund. And the Universal Service Fund is a $4 billion annual program that provides everything from special construction for schools and libraries and also discounts on their monthly recurring costs. So the state matching fund that we have, well, let me back up. Every school district has a discount percentage that is based on the level of poverty in the school district. So, for example, the Clark County School District is a 90% district, which is the highest level of discount. The Washoe County School District is an 80% district. The Elko County School District is an 80% district, and so on. And so that means E-rate will pay 80% of that school's monthly recurring cost for internet, and the provider will bill directly to them. When there's a school that isn't connected to fiber, there's also the opportunity to build new infrastructure to that school so that they are able to be connected to a faster, higher bandwidth connection, and that's called special construction. And so so what the state matching program does is, let's say there's a school in Washoe County. I'll give you a recent example. The school in Gerlach was not connected to fiber. It was connected only via a wireless connection that was pretty slow, and the kids there weren't getting an equal education. So what we did was we went out to bid according to the E-rate rules, and then solicited bids and found a bidder who would build fiber to that school, as well as the library in Gerlach. And because Washoe County is an 80% district, then the E-rate program will pay 80% of the cost. So where the state matching program then comes in is there's a 20% cost to the district. That is the district's share of the program. And for most school districts, funding several $100,000, for one-time construction costs is just not in the budget. And so what the federal E-rate program did is they said if a state is willing to contribute up to 10% of the cost for special construction, then that triggers an additional match from the FCC. And so for an 80% discount like the Washoe County School District with Gerlach, if the state contributed 10% to that project, then the FCC would kick in another 10% on top of that, and that would mean that 90% of the project would be paid for by the FCC, 10% by the state, and $0 out of pocket for the school district. And then the school district would still have their 20% cost share for the monthly recurring costs in the future. But ultimately, without the state match, that project would never come to pass because the district would never be able to pay for their share of the project. So the state match really is key to leveraging E-rate funds in most of the places, where there are significant builds and schools that are very rural and remote, because it triggers that additional FCC match.
Thank you. Follow-up, Chair? Thank you. Do you have the dollar amount associated with the last round that would be the state match?
Assemblywoman Brown-May, on our website, we've listed every single state match award that we've done, the school that it or library that it went to, and where, and then the amount of federal money that triggered. And happy to get that to your staff, the link to our website, so that you can review that.
Thank you for the question. If you could get that information, that dollar amount, to the committee secretary, that they can get it out to everyone, because they may not have the time to get to your website with all the other hearings going on. Thank you. Assemblywoman Gorlow?
Thank you, Chair. I had a question kind of relating to both the K through 5 STEM grant program and also the broadband. Now, in our backup documents, the K through 5 STEM program, it lists some of the schools that receive funding. We have some schools that are at 1,100, other schools as much as almost 50,000, and yet Washoe School District only receives $17,000. So can you tell me a little bit more about how those grants and those schools were selected, and kind of compare it also with the schools and the libraries that'll be getting the broadband? How do you go through that process?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Gorlow, for the question. Brian Mitchell for the record. So everything that we do with the K-5 STEM grant program, and frankly, most of the other programs as well, are via competitive grants. We do an extensive amount of outreach to the different school districts throughout the state to let them know that this opportunity is available, provide webinars and technical assistance to districts to help them understand how to apply and what information we're looking for, et cetera. We've had several meetings with Washoe County School District staff over the years, and I don't want to be negative, but we haven't had very positive feedback from the district when it comes to our STEM programs. So Washoe County School District has kind of informed us that they're taking a different direction, and so the K-5 STEM grants that we funded are oftentimes kind of one-offs from individual teachers or sometimes schools, but ultimately the district has kind of chosen to go in a different direction with regard to this. So it's not from a lack of desire on our part to fund things in Washoe County, but it's more a decision by the district to move in a different direction.
And can you go back, please, and talk a little bit about the broadband, how you're going to be selecting the schools and libraries for that project? Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Gorlow, for the question. In terms of selecting schools for that, we look at whether the school has an existing fiber connection. And so any school that doesn't have, or library that doesn't have a fiber connection is eligible, and we've identified 58 schools and libraries throughout the state that don't have fiber connections today. And so every single one of those is on our list. And ultimately, our goal is that when we're finished with this project in 2026, that every school in the state has access to a fiber, a high-speed internet connection via fiber.
Thank you. Assemblyman Watts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So staying on this a little bit, I'd like to discuss, and first of all, I just want to thank you for the presentation with all the different pools of funding for broadband. It's a lot to keep up with, I think, for us, and I'm sure for your office as well, and appreciate you providing some of the background on the different programs and some of the connections and the different timelines and different plans going on. So I wanted to talk about the ARPA Capital Project Fund. You mentioned a little bit about this before, but could you just go back and really focus on your expected timeline both to receive and expend those funds, and also clarify, because it seems to me that you haven't actually requested approval for authority to expend those funds in this budget, and so it seems like from the slides that you definitely have a plan for that. So could you just confirm that you plan to get that authority, and again just really touch on the high points of the timeline for receiving it and expending that funding source?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Motz. Brian Mitchell for the record. So the Capital Projects Fund, the state has essentially the money in the bank. In other words, it's not a competitive grant, it's a formula grant. And so with the formula dollars, we had to submit a plan to Treasury, and Treasury approves those plans for every state. And so we've gotten approval for our first plan, still waiting for approval for our second plan. In terms of the timeline for expending the funds, now that we have approval for the first plan, which was related to the low-income multi-dwelling units throughout the state, that we're working with our partners in the housing authorities to put together the request for proposals and the kind of the process. Once we've done that, we need to then submit the RFP document to Treasury for review and approval. And once we get approval from Treasury for kind of the details of how we're going to administer the program, then that will, then we'll be able to proceed with the with moving forward with that program. So the same thing will happen. We're just a couple of steps behind with the rest of the funding. I believe, and Daniel, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we had received fund approval for the or I guess authorization to expend the entire $135 million in the capital projects fund.
Daniel Marlowe, Administrator for Admin Services Division. That is correct. Those have been submitted through work programs. There's a lot of different funding sources, as you've seen, and Brian's staff, in coordination with my staff, keeping track of all that is difficult. At best, Brian only has 4 FTE currently with that one additional request. With a lot of these, they have been split into different categories to help manage that. We've tried to align them a little bit just numerically to be able to keep track, but a lot of them are split between the admin side and the actual program side, but those have been submitted through work programs approved by Interim Finance Committee.
Thank you for that. I just make sure that you connect with our staff to make sure about that, because again, I understand the challenges with all these different programs and pots, and I know that we definitely did authorize some funding for some of the planning and administrative activities, and just want to make sure that we've got everything buttoned up on the budget side for expending the rest of this too. And so, it looks like we've got to have these funds. We've got the plan, so it seems like we've got a plan to get everything obligated, and we have to expend them by 2026. And again, it sounds like a lot of this depends on review and approval from the federal government, but so it sounds like it's hard to put exact dates on things, but you're putting everything out there and you feel confident that we'll be able to get everything expended by the deadline. Is that a fair assessment?
Assemblyman Watts, Brian Mitchell for the record. So we, first, I will connect with your staff afterward and just make sure we have everything buttoned up. With regard to the kind of the expenditure and the timing question, I think we feel pretty confident that we'll be able to get things expended. Certainly if there are any delays, it won't be because of us, but it'll be because of our federal partners. And what we've been told is that the secretaries of the various departments have waiver authority on that 2026 deadline. Where states can ask for a waiver if, for example, we've had a permitting issue that's taken longer than expected, et cetera. So, having said that, I'm confident though that all of the funding that we have coming to us will get expended by the deadline.
Thank you. We'll have 2 more questions before we close out this budget hearing. We'll go to Senator Gansard, and we'll end with Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate all the work that you're doing on broadband. I'm not sure that we imagined that's what you would be spending so much time doing, but I wanted to get, if you have a total of all the dollars that are being brought to Nevada for fiber connectivity. You've got a bunch of different programs. I don't know if you've ever added them up. And then to go along with that, there's been a recommendation for a match from the state. Do we have enough match in the budget to be able to maximize all those programs?
Thank you, Senator Sievers-Gansert, for the question. Brian Mitchell, for the record. We have added it up, and so there's it's roughly $450 million in guaranteed funding that we have, and then roughly another $400 million in possible funding, depending on kind of what the BEAD formula ends up looking like for the state, as well as if we are successful in some of the competitive grants that we've received or that we've applied for, along with possible additional funding for programs like the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Grant that may come to the state. With regard to the second question around match, I think this is a critical question. We definitely do not want to leave any federal dollars on the table for lack of match. And so we have asked for and received approval for using some of our state fiscal recovery dollars as a matching fund for BEAD. So I feel pretty confident there that we've taken care of that program there. Where I think there may be some additional match that may be needed is on the school and library part. We have funding in the budget, $1 million in each year for match for E-rate, and I think that's that's an area where we're going to be building to a lot of schools. Having said that, I think we have sufficient match in the budget right now, but would we can certainly keep you up to date if any feeling on that changes.
Thank you. And just a question for fiscal staff. Would the infrastructure bank be available for something like this if we need any more match? So we have a bucket of about $75 million in case they need more funds in the form of a grant versus a loan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Sarah Kaufman, Legislative Council Bureau Fiscal Analysis Division. Yes, I do believe that it would be appropriate use of the infrastructure dollars to be utilized for that purpose as well.
Thank you. I appreciate you keeping that in mind in case you need more funding. And again, I appreciate you tracking all these different programs and the nuances so that we can maximize the dollars and the availability of broadband across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know you've mentioned it a couple of times now, but I didn't catch the quantity until your response just now, but I want to clarify the expected award amount for the BEAD program and then the timeline related to that receipt and expenditure, especially if we're tying it to ARPA funds for that match.
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Peters. I'm going to scroll back to the related slide in the presentation. Just to recap, every state gets a minimum BEAD allocation of $100 million. And then based on the formula, we're expecting anywhere from roughly an additional $150 to $300 million in BEAD funds. And I realize that's not very precise, but that's kind of the confidence interval that we have right now. The BEAD funding has the same expenditure timeline as the funding from the State Fiscal Recovery Fund, so I don't foresee any issues with being able to expend the funds jointly. What you'll see is from the State Fiscal Recovery Fund that we'll be expending the funding for phase one. That'll be to the state and local government facilities. That'll come out the door first, and the funding for the BEAD match will then follow on in a couple years once the BEAD program comes online and we've gone through all the things that we need to do to submit to them.
Thank you. So I imagine we'll be hearing more about this during IFC in the following interim, given the timeline of application for fall. Is that what my understanding?
I'm both Assemblywoman Peters, Brian Mitchell for the record. I'm both planning and looking forward to coming back to you at IFC many times. You're going to be sick and tired of me eventually, but.
Well, thank you so much. Madam Chair, may I have a follow-up on a similar item? But
go ahead.
So you mentioned a broadband assistance program, and honestly, I'm exhausted of tracking where all of these assistance programs are housed, because we have a few in DHHS, we have one for water in a different department, and then now we have a broadband one in your department. How do people access that? And then also, what are your requirements for eligibility and proof of for accessing that broadband assistance program?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Peters, for the question. Brian Mitchell for the record. And you're right, it is exhausting kind of tracking all of the different funds across different places. I think my goal would be that is to make this as easy as possible for those who are eligible and to have kind of a one-stop shop where they can go to find information. So to that end, regarding the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is the $30 a month subsidy for folks who qualify, that actually isn't a program that's run by us. We don't see any money from it. It's a program that is run directly from the FCC through the individual's provider. So what would happen is if I'm eligible for the program, I would, and I don't have internet, I would log on to a website, which, that makes a whole lot of sense, right? But you can call it, they also have a 1-800 number and a paper application that you can do as well. But you essentially would log on to the website and sign up through your provider. So if provider X is your provider, then they participate in the program, then you would submit through them, and then the funding for your the $30 a month subsidy flows directly from the FCC to your provider. And so, you don't have to worry about like receiving a check from the FCC and then remitting that to your internet service provider. They just discount your bill. So in terms of kind of the things that are eligible, the FCC website will walk you through a number of different ways to submit eligibility information. It could come in the form of a letter from like let's say you live in one of the low-income MDUs that the housing authorities manage. You could the housing authority could submit a letter on your behalf that you qualify for a for a housing voucher, and that would qualify you. Or there's ways to submit documentation related to Medicaid or your child's school lunch program, et cetera. I think it's a pretty complicated program, and I think there's a lot of barriers to people enrolling and signing up. And so one of the things that we're looking at, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but one of the things that we're looking at as a possible use of our state capacity grant program for digital equity is funding digital navigators that can go out into communities and sit down with somebody who maybe doesn't feel very comfortable, in front of a computer to gather their paperwork and enroll in the program, and to kind of help them through the process all the way. I think we've had some success, about, we're in the high 40s statewide in terms of enrollment rate, but, in order to get closer to 100, we're going to need to provide some additional help to people.
Thank you. And I know that there's a few members that have a few more questions, but I'm going to ask you to ask those to them offline. We have a very long day ahead of us. So I thank you for being here and the presentation and the information that we requested. If you could get that to our committee secretaries, that would be great. And with that, we will close the budget hearing for Budget 1003. And members, we're going to go a little bit out of order on our agenda. We are going to go to the Attorney General's office next. We'll invite the Attorney General and his staff to the table. And we have 4 budget hearings that he and his staff will be going to. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Whenever you're ready, we're ready for you.
Great. Good morning, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. We are ready. My name is Aaron Ford. I am your Attorney General. Honored and delighted to be here with you. I'm accompanied by 2 of my bosses, my Chief of Staff, Teresa Benitez Thompson, and my Chief Financial Officer, Jessica Hoban. And we're here today to present our budget items. I want to thank you for the opportunity to introduce you to the office and to review our biennial budget requests with you. My office consists of nearly 350 dedicated, hardworking individuals committed to enforcing Nevada law and upholding justice for the protection and benefit of our citizens. You've heard me say it before, and I'll say it again. I believe in our office that our job is justice, is to ensure justice for all Nevadans. And as Attorney General, I have directed the employees of the office to approach their work in this same vein. Hence, the motto for our office is, "Our job is justice." To support the office's mission of justice, I have adopted what we call the 5 C's: constitutional rights, criminal justice and reform, consumer protection, client service, and community engagement. Each of these C's serves as a moral compass to guide the ways my office can serve Nevada and all of Nevada. As the state's chief law enforcement officer, the Attorney General Office represents the people of Nevada. We are the people's lawyer. We represent the best interests of the state before state and federal tribunals, before appellate courts, and criminal and civil matters. We also serve as legal counsel to state officers, state departments, and to most state boards and commissions. Additionally, my office works with our local, state, and federal law enforcement partners to protect the public. I invite you all to read our 2020 through 2022 biennial report, which we've submitted to the committee. But knowing that you are busy people, I will share some of the highlights with you. We have aggressively defended tort claims and saved the state of Nevada more than $1.3 billion with the B dollars in taxpayer dollars. We have processed over 18,450 constituent complaints and 39,069 constituent inquiries for information and for services. We've prosecuted elder abuse. We've provided support to law enforcement agencies across the state to do the same. Our office has attended nearly 500 guardianship hearings for elder and vulnerable Nevadans. And we have obtained more than $330 million in funding to end the opioid epidemic in our state. As you can see, the Office of Attorney General is a lean, highly efficient office. However, due to hiring challenges and below market pay, the Office of Attorney General has become too lean. I worry about an alarming acceleration of that trend unless there can be reconsideration for many needed items. Through the months-long state budgeting process, I prioritized several things, some of which I will highlight today for our office. Pay parity for our investigators. I will discuss this further in a second. Reclassification of legal secretaries in our office, something else that I will touch on in a second. And adding a one-step increase to all unclassified employees in our office, including our attorneys. I've also requested 2 victims advocates. Some of you were here when we passed Marcy's Law. Marcy's Law requires communications with victims and survivors of certain crimes. We are the top law enforcement officer in this office in the state, and we have no victims advocates, not one. And we're requesting 2. We've also asked for additional attorney positions in our patterns and practice division. You will recall last legislative session, after the murder of George Floyd and the killing of Breonna Taylor, I presented to this body a request to allow my office to create a pattern and practice division. We are now requesting a chief attorney position for that division, and especially in view of even current headlines of Tyree Nichols. Clearly, you can understand the reason why we are continuing to pursue this. We're also asking for reclassification of a deputy attorney general position to a senior deputy attorney position, attorney general position in our public safety unit. Returning to the first 3 items I mentioned, I'd like to reference Governor Lombardo's State of the State speech, where he said, and I quote, "There is arguably nothing more important to the 3.2 million Nevadans in our state than public safety." I agree. And as the state's top law enforcement agency, we take that job very seriously. But we need additional resources that we've requested to be included in the recommended budget, and resources that we now request this legislature provide. Specifically, we struggle to retain investigators, legal secretaries, and lawyers due to deficient below-market pay. Please indulge me a few moments on this topic. On the specific topic of law enforcement, Governor Lombardo also stated during his speech, and again, I quote, "There are clear disparities in Nevada's public safety compensation structures and it's unfair. To address this," he says, "we should make every effort to retain our public safety personnel. Therefore," he says, he's proposing a 2-grade increase for all public safety employees above what is recommended for all public employees to help bring them closer to parity with local agencies and to ensure we are no longer the training ground for local government forces," unquote. I wholeheartedly agree with these statements. My office has indeed been the training ground for many law enforcement agencies across the state, and there are reasons for that. Pay parity is one of the main reasons for that. But not just pay parity between our agency and local agencies. Understand this, our investigators are not only not paid at parity with local law enforcement agencies, they're not even paid the same as other investigators in state service. I want you to hear what I just said. My investigators who put in the work as a top law enforcement agency in the state, they're not paid even the same as other investigators in state service. That's a pay parity issue that has not been addressed in the recommended budget, and one that I am asking that you address on a going forward basis. This pay parity disparity between the Office of Attorney General criminal investigators and other classified investigators in similar state agencies is approximately 2 grades, with some positions paid up to 4 grades higher than their AG counterparts. Likewise, the unclassified Chief of Investigations, my chief, Chief Scott, who's a 29-year veteran of Metro, he receives approximately 10% to 18% less compensation than other state positions of comparable responsibility. I respectfully ask that this body fix this gross disparity and accommodate our budget request for pay parity for our investigators. Moreover, it's not clear that our investigators were included in the governor's proposed 2-step pay increase for all other public safety personnel. I'm asking that you ensure that that's the case, and I'm expressly requesting that this body not only provide pay parity between our investigators and other state investigators, but you also include our investigators in the 2-step increase that was referenced in the State of State speech. Let me be clear, though, our investigators aren't the only ones facing pay issues. Our legal secretaries are, too. Aside from the occasional COLA, which oftentimes, as you know, doesn't even keep up with the rate of inflation, our legal secretaries have not received a raise since 2001. I didn't say 21. Since 2001, our legal secretaries have not received a raise. And they're the backbone of any law firm, and they're the backbone of our law firm, and it's no exception. This agency cannot function to serve the state client agencies and uphold its public safety mission without the support of our secretarial staff. Yet, these employees are some of the lowest paid staff in the agency. I'm asking you to please help us with that. We asked that the governor's budget included, it did not, and therefore I am asking you to likewise consider this. Low pay has a direct result on our agency's ability to recruit and retain qualified employees who can perform the legal support services that are required. From January 1, 2017 to present, 43 Legal Secretary 2 employees and 3 supervising legal secretaries have left the agency, and nearly half of those departments could have been avoided by higher paying departures. We need your help to fix that, and we respectfully request that our legal secretaries receive a higher salary of 2 to 4 grades to improve recruitment and retention of these critical employees. Now, I didn't ask them to do this, but you will notice in your packets probably at least 20 letters from secretaries, and if you have not gotten it, it's coming.
There's 40 letters.
40 letters. 40 letters. Oh, okay. From secretaries who are, they need our help, y'all, and I'm here to speak on their behalf. I'd also like to mention that the same salary issues above are the reasons why our agency has a hard time recruiting and retaining attorneys. We're, again, the training ground for other agencies within and without the state, and it makes it increasingly difficult for our agency. Accordingly, I'm asking the governor and I'm asking you to offer a 1-step increase for all of our unclassified staff in the office as well. We believe that this is a show of good faith, and it's a show of appreciation that would enable us to recruit and retain attorneys to help fulfill the all-important job of justice. As I close my preliminary remarks and offer the mic to my colleagues here, I want to reiterate that my office has been working and been in conversation with the governor's staff to request budget amendments on these items. But I'm covering all bases. And I'm likewise asking that this body, irrespective of what happens with the conversations I'm having elsewhere, that you give due consideration to these requests. We need you to help in this regard, and we are appealing to you for that particular reason. And so at this point, I will invite my Chief Financial Officer, Jessica Hoban, to walk you through the budget items that you've requested information on. Thank you so much. And Madam Chair, I would like to beg your indulgence if I have to bounce out, if I have to leave, will you allow me that ability to do so?
Yes, we understand if you have to bounce out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Ladies, you can go ahead.
For the record, Jessica Hoban, Chief Financial Officer for the Office of the Attorney General. The following budgets that I'm going to be speaking on today are related to the governor's recommended budget and associated with the budget accounts that are listed on today's agenda. I'm just mentioning that because we do have 23 budget accounts across the entire agency, but we've only prepared the presentation for the ones requested on the agenda. The first one is Budget Account 1030. That is the administrative account. The Office of the Attorney General Administrative Account is responsible to provide legal advice, counsel, and representation to the executive branch of state government with administrative support for all areas to carry out the business functions of the office. The administrative account consists of 6 primary operational units. There's administration, which covers our internal human resources, communications, along with public information, information technology, and fiscal services division. It also includes Office for Military Legal Assistance, Government Affairs, Criminal Prosecutions, Post-Convictions, and a majority of our investigation staff are also housed in this administrative account. We have offices in Carson City, Las Vegas, Reno, and Ely. Next slide. In this budget account, the primary decision unit that was included in the governor's recommended budget, there are 2 decision units, and each one includes reclassification of existing staff. The first decision unit is E805. This request reclassifies an existing accountant technician 2 position to an administrative services officer 1. Currently, this position is housed in our accounting unit that is under the Fiscal Services Division. The accounting unit only has 6 staff. As I mentioned, we do have 23 budget accounts across the department, and those 6 staff are responsible for managing 21 of those accounts. Comparatively to the number of budget accounts with other state agencies, that is a very small staff that we're operating with. The current Account Technician 2 position title is a series that is very difficult to fill, and it does not offer a pathway for progression in other fiscal positions of responsibility in state service. So this request would reclassify it to an administrative services position 1, and it would allow our office to meet some shortfalls that we have with complications of the budget accounts that we do have, align operations and responsibilities, help with workload, assignment allocation, and increase the comprehensive budget management that our office is able to do currently. It also provides more favorable progression of position titles and support of succession planning and career advancement for current state employees who may be in other position titles. The next decision unit is E815. This request is a reclassification, but it is of an unclassified position, so a retitle of a bureau chief position to be an assistant attorney general position. In the Office of the Attorney General, the Chief of Staff and the Assistant Attorney General perform duties comparable to deputy directors at other state agencies. Reclassifying this position would provide a sufficient number of executive-level leadership positions at the Attorney General's office, and it would align the organizational structure in a similar manner as other state departments. The Chief of Staff is responsible for administrative services. The current existing Assistant Attorney General position oversees the units which provide legal assistance to the customer agencies, boards, and commissions. While the position that is being requested for this reclassification is responsible for overseeing the regulatory programs that are within the Office of the Attorney General, including criminal and fraud investigations, prosecutions, and consumer protection. The next budget account is 1038. That is the Consumer Advocate account. The Attorney General's Bureau of Consumer Protection, which we often refer to as BCP as the acronym, is under the direction of the Consumer Advocate, and it performs several functions vital to the economic well-being of Nevada's consumers and businesses. The BCP serves to protect Nevada's consumers from unfair and deceptive trade practices through local civil enforcement actions, participation in multi-state actions, and in collaboration with the federal agencies. As part of this role, it is the unit primarily responsible for bringing in a lot of the different settlement agreements that we have come to you in the past through IFC. It's also primarily responsible for bringing in some of those settlements that we were talking about and that AG Ford was referencing that are related to the opioid epidemic as well. Modifications proposed in this budget account include the transfer of 21 staff from the mortgage settlement budget account, which is currently budget account 1045. That budget account was established more than 10 years ago to administer deposits that were received from the National Mortgage Settlement Agreement. That is a one-time funding that was anticipated to be depleted during the 2023 to 2025 biennium, resulting in the elimination of this budget account. Last legislative session, there was AB 357 that was brought forward, which has since been codified in NRS 228.333, which created the Consumer Protection Legal Account. So trying to bring up the other two budget accounts that are kind of impacted on this budget account 1038. The bill that was passed last session and created the Consumer Protection Legal Account, which is now budget account 1048, authorizes unrestricted settlements to fund the Attorney General's office, allowing retention of the staff and associated operating costs to continue vital work for settlements that protect the interests of Nevada citizens. So essentially, the mortgage fraud settlement funds that are in budget account 1045 are being depleted, and rather than eliminating that program, last session, the bill that was passed allows us to retain those staff by using unrestricted settlement dollars in portion for functions in the Office of the Attorney General. So this account will be receiving, as I said, the 21 positions that are currently in budget account 1045, and the funding for those positions would be transferred from budget account 1048, which was the Consumer Protection Legal Account that was also created under that bill last session. The next budget account is 1041. This is the Council for Prosecuting Attorneys. The Advisory Council provides leadership on legal and public policy issues related to the duties of prosecutors, to enhance communication and cooperation among prosecutors in the judiciary, law enforcement, state and local government, the bar, and other public and private organizations concerned with the administration of justice. The primary proposal in this budget account is found in Decision Unit E500. It proposes the replacement of administrative court settlements pursuant to NRS 176.059 with general fund appropriations. The next and final budget account that is on the agenda for today is 1042, which is Victims of Domestic Violence. Through this program, the Attorney General's Office has been instrumental in developing law enforcement protocols and training curriculum, as well as working with prosecutors, courts, and victim services to identify barriers to help in their efforts to hold perpetrators accountable and protect victims. This budget account also supports the Committee on Domestic Violence, the statewide victim information notification everyday system, which you may have heard through its acronym called VINE, and assists victims and provides education to the public regarding domestic violence issues. There are 2 decision units in this budget account for consideration as well. The first one is also Decision Unit E500, and similar to the previous budget account that we were discussing, it proposes replacement of administrative court assessments pursuant to NRS 176.059 with general fund appropriations. One more. The second decision unit is E816. This is a pay alignment or pay parity for our current victims of domestic violence ombudsman position. This position was created in 1998, and it was one of the first positions of this title established in Nevada State Service. Over the years, the Ombudsman series has evolved and become a recognized skill set. Additional ombudsman positions have been created during that time frame, and those other ombudsman positions were established with a higher pay scale, while this particular position was never adjusted accordingly. So this request funds the alignment of the Ombudsman for Domestic Violence position to be in line with other positions of similar title that are currently in state service. And that is the end of my portion of the presentation, so I will turn it over to our Chief of Staff, Teresa Benitez-Thompson.
Thank you so much, Teresa Benitez-Thompson, Chief of Staff to Attorney General Ford. Just in this last closing side, the numbers that Attorney General Ford was talking about in the beginning of the presentation with the needs for the office, we did want to quantify that for you because we do think that we spent a good amount of time trying to think about what the office really needed and trying to be strategic and also thinking about the dollars associated with those asks. So for these to be fully funded in year 1, of the biennium budget, that would be $2.7 million for year 2, 2.8 over the biennium, a $5.6 million ask. So we did try to think very conservatively and thoughtfully and strategically about those dollars, and we're hoping that it is a moderate ask, and we're open for your questions.
Thank you for the presentation. We do have a few questions. We're going to start with Speaker Yeager.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Attorney General, good to see you, and of course, good to see our former colleague, Chief of Staff Benitez-Thompson. Hope it feels okay to be on that side of the table. Just a couple of questions on, really, I'm glad you have this slide up because there are a couple of questions on these 6 items that I understand at this point are not part of the executive budget and conversations are ongoing. But the first question I had was on the victim witness advocates. I do remember passing Marcy's Law, and obviously there is a lot of communication that has to happen. I was a little surprised to hear that you don't have victim witnesses in the Attorney General's office. So I was just wondering, how does that process work right now? Who has the responsibility in the office of making those notifications to victims, which throughout a case could be several notifications about things that are going on in the case?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, to you through you to, okay, very good. Mr. Yeager, Speaker Yeager, great to see you, sir. Thank you so much for the question. Frankly, it's been an ad hoc approach. Our chief of our post-conviction division, Heather Proctor, who works on a lot of habeas petitions and things that are post-conviction, has a lot of interaction with victims. Some of our criminal prosecutors have to have direct interactions with victims, but we don't have a centralized individual, one person, certainly not 2, who are called victims advocates, and they are quite important. And frankly, the need predated Marcy's Law. The importance for victims advocates to be able to work with victims of crimes as they work through the process of recovery, but also the process of the judicial process is paramount importance. We've just not had the ability to request those, and that's what we're doing right now.
Thank you. And could I ask a quick follow-up? And that item right below that, the chief attorney for patterns and practice, obviously remember that legislation. And so my question was, what's the status today? Is it that there is work being done in that area, but you need more folks? Or is it just everyone's so busy there hasn't been able to be an emphasis on those kind of investigations and prosecutions, and so you're asking for someone dedicated to be able to take the lead on that? So if you could kind of let me know what it is today and what your vision would be for that position.
Thank you so much. When we request, the short answer is that we need some assistance in this area. The longer answer is that when we ask for the position to be created and the authority to be given to our office, my general counsel, Leslie Piro, was the person who I placed in charge of overseeing this, and she is overwhelmed. Completely and entirely overwhelmed with the duties that she has, and so she needs assistance in that regard, and that's why we requested a chief attorney for patterns and practice.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions, and thank you for the answers. We'll move on. I believe we have Assemblywoman Backus next.
Thank you, Chair. And before I ask my question, I just want to thank those legal assistants that are standing strong with the AG's office. I have a small firm in private practice. I know it was really hard to hire legal assistants over the last couple of years, and the salaries needed to compensate them has been competitive. For those that have stuck it through, thank you for your service to our state. My question pertains to E805, and I wasn't sure. It kind of sounded like this new classification may have additional duties, or was it more so that this position is needed to recruit someone to fulfill that position in light of like recruitment issues? But if it is to just change it, to reclassify it for additional duties, what would those additional duties be?
For the record, Jessica Hoban, Chief Financial Officer for the Office of the Attorney General. There is some additional duties that are needed to be performed as well. I had mentioned that the accounting unit is 6 staff, and we actively manage 21 budget accounts. So some things that we have seen where we would need a higher level position and additional assignments that would be given there are specifically related to budget management, preparation of work programs. That's not currently, that to my knowledge has never been assigned to the current position, which is the Account Tech 2. Currently, in the accounting unit, we have 1 Administrative Services Officer 3, and my position are pretty much responsible for most, if not all, of the work programs that come through. So we do need frontline staff who are actually managing the budget on a daily basis and planning for work programs, budget adjustments. They would also be supervising accounting assistant staff, which the account technician position had not been assigned in the past few years. So those are the primary additional duties that would be given to the Administrative Services Officer 1.
Madam Chair, may I have a follow-up? Okay, I wasn't sure if this was currently a vacant position, but my next question could apply to both, whether it was vacant or not. And it sounds like your entire office is probably absorbing a lot of different duties with vacancies, but how is your department currently absorbing the duties of the vacant account technician?
For the record, Jessica Hoban, Chief Financial Officer, Office of the Attorney General. Yes, the position is currently vacant. At the moment, we're intentionally keeping it vacant. And the reason for that is because there is no pathway for eligibility for an account technician, anyone in an account technician series, and current Department of Human Resource Management. There is no current pathway for eligibility to any person who would be holding that position to actually qualify for a higher level management position. To give a little more background on that, There's one management analyst 2 that is currently in the fiscal unit, and then it jumps to an administrative services officer 3. So there's very limited opportunity for staff that we do hire at the entry level to progress beyond an accounting assistant 3 to get to the higher management level positions that we have. The way that we are trying to, I've been using the word triage, the duties that haven't been performed, as we have shifted all of the supervisory responsibilities to the management analyst 2. As far as managing, we have a system where we bill some of the non-executive agencies that use our services. I'm trying to fill in with some of those duties, as well as assisting with contract management. Our Administrative Services Officer 3 is jumping in to help with a lot of the unit management and oversight, as well as taking on a lot of our grant management responsibilities, not only with the subgrants that we have, but also providing fiscal reporting on quarterly and monthly levels for the federal grants that we receive.
And Teresa Benitez Thompson, Chief of Staff, for the record, if I could add on to that, because Jessica Hoban is so humble, but the work program load that she's talking about really impacts the responsiveness of our office. So a good example would be in a real world one that we were talking about in recent weeks, where some grant dollars from the T-Mobile Settlement Fund going out to the Owen Project to fund really good projects in the community. And there's strict deadlines for getting documentation in and for that process. And just by volume, the question of, can we get this done in April, or do we need to push this off until July 2023? And it's really hard for community programs to hear that you've got to, you can get this money, but now you're going to have to wait 6 or 7 months because we just don't. We're asking one person to do a lot of different things, and ideally with that support, we could look at them and say, yep, we've got someone dedicated to help more with these work programs, who isn't also busy trying to manage $17 million in our grants unit and all of the tort and extradition stuff as well. So it will just really improve us a lot too on that customer service end, in terms of how we get those work programs moving to help with our community partners as well.
Assemblyman Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here today. I want to start by saying that, we've heard across state departments how so much of Nevada is running lean. And one of the places I don't think we can afford to run lean is in a department that is producing the results that the Attorney General's office is producing. And so I want to say thank you to you for your leadership, to your team, and to your staff for really bringing it home for Nevadans. With that being said, I have a couple of questions regarding E815 and the reclassification from the Bureau Chief to the Assistant Attorney General. Can you describe some of the benefits anticipated in the reclassification of the roles?
Yeah, Teresa Benitez Thompson, Chief of Staff, for the record, through Chair Monroe Moreno to Assemblyman Miller. I think probably one of the biggest and most realistic practical responses is we're keeping a great person who's doing phenomenal work, who's been underpaid for 4 years. Miss Christine Jones Brady came on with Attorney General Ford in his first administration, doing just as much work as the first Assistant Attorney General, overseeing Bureau of Consumer Protections, which has grown a lot, the Investigations Division, Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, which kind of a unique unit out there with strong federal ties that we've got to keep very good management on, or we get, potential for really ugly audits, to be frank. Criminal Prosecution Division and Post-Conviction Division, so overseeing a lot of people, and really this person needed, in order to keep the great talent around to do this kind of work for consistency and longevity in the office, we just needed to get this adjustment made, and we're very appreciative of it.
Aaron Ford for the record. And just from some further background on this, a lot of Attorney General offices have one first assistant. And that's what I inherited when I came here, one first assistant. Sometimes they call them deputy attorneys general, the number two in the office, right? But a lot of times when you go that route, everything bottlenecks at that one person. And what I wanted to do was to ensure that we could divvy up the workload in the Attorney General's office. So Christine Jones-Brady oversees the items that she just mentioned. The first assistant, who is now Craig Newby, used to be Kyle George. He oversees a lot of our civil stuff, administrative practices and things of that sort. So I have essentially two number twos in the office that help me with the substantive work. But Christine Jones-Brady graciously came in being underpaid. And I don't like that. So I'm asking, please, that we pay her what she's doing owing, and that's why we're asking for the reclassification.
Thank you. My next question is, so how will if you can explain how the duties will change for the Assistant Attorney General, and then also will we be keeping a bureau chief, or what does that look like?
So Christine Jones-Brady's, my current number two's second assistant, her duties won't change at all. This is an adjustment of salary, essentially, for the work that she's been doing for 4 years, and we think on a going-forward basis needs to be paid commensurate with what the first assistant is normally paid. We just didn't have the availability of that position. When I used to sit on your side over there, you give us PCNs, we have to fill the PCNs. We don't get to create new things, and so I could not create a new position that paid her at the level that was appropriate. That's why we're requesting that here. In terms of whether this is a request to reclassify. So the bureau chief position would be reclassified and therefore go away. Am I right about that?
Thank you. Senator Titus?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question. Thank you all for being here today. These are big budgets, and your work is very critical. I have a question related to the actual document or the overview that gave us on your biennial report, specifically on page 20. And that relates to budget 1037, the Medicaid fraud budget. So it's an unfortunate topic that we have to deal with, that we know Medicaid is an important component for our constituents, our citizens in Nevada, but yet people always take advantage of things. And so I'm curious, in that budget, we know that 75% of it is federally funded, 25% is then used from the fees, but looking at on page 20 there, where you mention the cases that you've been able to prosecute, and then that goes back to the state Medicaid department. I'm just wondering how that fits federally. We never have to pay the feds back for their money that they've given us. It can go directly back to Medicaid when you recover those funds.
For the record, Jessica Hoban, Chief Financial Officer, Office of the Attorney General. The funds that we do recover in our office actually use my understanding is we apply the FMAP, and we send the federal portion of that goes to state Medicaid, HIGFAP, Healthcare Finance and Policy. We send that to Medicaid, and then they manage that along with the federal guidelines for their program, and we retain the smaller portion for our office, which we are then allowed to use for the match on the federal funds that our office receives.
So that offsets your match for the federal funds. Great,
Yes.
thank you for that, and thank you for continuing to do that. And I'd love to see when you have that, because this is an overview, and that document that you gave us spreadsheets on some of the things like workers' comp front, but you didn't do one for the Medicaid. So perhaps you could share that at your opportunity with members, if that's okay with our chair.
Attorney General Aaron Ford for the record. Happy to do that. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if my chief of that division, Andrew Schulke, isn't watching this right now. And I will absolutely ask him to put together the information you've requested, and we're happy to make him available to you for additional follow-up if you need.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair, for the question, and thank you for what you're doing at G.
Senator Ganser?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I want to ask you about some of the settlements. So if you look at page 30 and 31 of your report, there's a little over $16 million in settlements that are unrelated to the opioid cases. And I want to know how those are managed and how how you determine where those funds go or distributed later.
Aaron Ford, for the record, fortunately, I don't make any determinations on that. That's because you all passed a law last go around that says half the money goes to the BCP to help us hire and retain staff, and the other half goes to legal aid. So that's generally, unless there's some written admonition against doing so, which is not general in our settlements. That's according to statute how the settlement monies come in. Half go to legal aid, and half go to the Bureau of Consumer Protection in order to hire staff to facilitate our job.
Thank you. And then the money that goes to the BCP part, can that be allocated outside of the state? So is it just to pay for their staff, or can you provide grants to other organizations?
It's Aaron Ford, for the record. It's for staff and training.
That's interesting. The money can get pretty big, and so that's maybe something we should look at, because that's a potentially huge allocation. So thank you for that. And then I was kind of wondering around. I guess that's all the state settlements. And then the Bank of America settlement dollars, it looks like that's getting transferred over. Is that going to the BCP too, or where the mortgage settlement? The National Settlement Administration, it's budget 340-1045.
Okay. For the record, Jessica Hoban, Chief Financial Officer. When we were building the budget last session, we were projecting that those funds would be fully depleted in the current biennium. What has happened with some staffing shortages, and then we also, to balance the budget, we had to discontinue some of the programs that were operated under that budget account a little bit earlier than we had originally planned. It's going to leave a bit of excess at the end of this current biennium. We have been working with LCB and Governor's Finance Office staff to determine what needs to be done, what should be done with that balance that is going to be left, but we don't have a final determination on that just yet.
Thank you so much for the answer to that question. Members, we have a few budgets that are on our agenda today, and some of the questions that are being asked are budgets that were not agendized. So I'm going to ask if you have questions for budgets that we did not agendize today, that you ask those questions off record to them later, okay? Because they're not on our agenda for today.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
On a question on a budget that we're hearing today?
No, just a question about this process. When we originally started, there was a list of budgets that basically were going to be staff closings. And in talking to fiscal staff and I thought leadership on our side, we thought it was okay to ask questions when those budgets within the agency, even though they were staff closings, that we could ask questions.
I believe that's problematic for us to go over during this hearing for any budget that we did not agendize. So we can have those questions offline.
Okay, and all this information too is also in the annual report,
Correct.
which is actually included in our packet.
Correct.
That's everything we've drawn is from there. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Moving on, we'll go to Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It's great to see you all here this morning. I have a question relative to the transfer of the 21 positions. Thanks for explaining in detail. It looks like the National Settlement Administration budget is where they were previously allocated, and we're moving over to Consumer Advocate budget. Can you just confirm that there's no material changes in the job expectations for those positions? And then as a follow-up, are any of those positions vacant, or are you currently fully staffed?
Thank you so much. Teresa Benitez Thompson, Chief of Staff to Attorney General Ford, through Chair Monroe Moreno to Assemblywoman Brown-May. So thank you so much for the first part of your question. The activity and the duties of the positions will not change substantially. They'll move over, and we're consolidating those budget accounts. To your second question, I think, which was, if you could restate it, you were asking about...
Are you fully staffed?
Are we
currently,
fully
or are there
staffed?
vacancies?
Across the division, we've got 46 vacancies as of last week, and those are falling in various amount of budgets accounts. So if you wanted to know the exact amount of vacancies in 1048, we could, 1045, we could get that to you.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Peters?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is related to 1041, Budget 1041, E500. And I'm wondering about the transition from fee-funded to general funded, what that impact to operations for the Council for Prosecuting Attorneys budget would be.
For the record, Jessica Hoban, Chief Financial Officer, Office of the Attorney General. The governor's recommended budget that is proposed offsets on an equivalent level. So the budget is being proposed as being fully funded. It's simply just using the general fund instead of the court fee assessments. It's my understanding that there may be other budget accounts across the state, not just under the Attorney General's office, that may see a similar issue, which is why it is tied to only the court assessments that are associated with NRS 176.059. So the operation should remain the same, and I do believe the budget is fully funded with the general fund replacing those court assessments.
Any follow-up? Okay. And moving on, I believe our next question will be Vice Chair Dondarova.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So one of the questions I have is the impact of the reduction in the court administrative assessment revenues had on the victims of domestic violence budget during our current biennium.
For the record, Jessica Hoban, Office of the Attorney General. There was a significant decline in revenue that was received in the current biennium, and our office is proposing a work program, I believe, to use ARPA funds to fill that gap that should be coming to the April Interim Finance Committee meeting.
Madam Chair, may I ask one more? And so what benefits are going to be realized from replacing that court administrative assessments in the victims' domestic violence budget with general fund appropriations?
Okay. Jessica Hoban, for the record. If general fund, in the victims of domestic violence budget account, there are actually two revenue sources from court fees. Only one of them is being proposed, is being replaced with general fund. The other one that is listed under a separate NRS, I believe it's under NRS 228. I could get you the exact reference if you need. But we are going to be retaining one court fee revenue. The court fee revenue that is being replaced with general fund would, if the general fund were not there to replace that declining revenue, then that budget account would not be solvent. That account would not be able to continue to operate with a balanced budget. There are only 2 staff in that budget account, so there's not much room for reduced revenue, and it does have a fairly small reserve that it does retain, so it wouldn't be able to operate and impact across the state. That particular budget account currently hosts the VINE program that I was talking about, the victims notification system, which is a statewide system. We do receive some contributions from counties to help support that system, but with the decline in the court fees as well as reduced funding that we're getting in grants, federal grants that are also coming into that budget account, it would not be able to continue operations.
So it's safe to say, that our domestic violence unit is very lean needs these assessments to just stay solvent and just stay at where we can help this group of people moving forward.
And Aaron Ford, for the record, entirely safe to say.
Thank you very much, just clarifying.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have a question on the current slide, and completely agree with you that across the board, there's a pay parity issue, whether it's the attorneys, the secretaries, but specifically with the investigators, I want to kind of touch on a little bit, because I know in the last few years we've had rampant unemployment fraud, and I know that's something that your office has been investigating, and so I just kind of want to address, are we going to be able to hire more investigators with the higher pay that you guys are proposing to collect back some of that unemployment that we've lost? I think in your annual report you touched on only 2 cases that we've been able to prosecute fully, and so I just want to make sure that if we do go that forward with that we have a return on our investment and we're able to go back and collect on a lot of that fraud that took place. Aaron Ford, for the record. Thank you, Assemblyman Hafen. The short answer is your return on investment by investing in the investigators in the office that is the top law enforcement officer of the state will be surely recognized. We're having a hard time recruiting. We're having a hard time retaining, and our responsibilities include, in addition to what you've talked about, the investigation of unemployment, fraud issues dating back to the pandemic, so many other things. And you will see absolutely an increase in our ability to effectuate our job positively. And I have investigators, frankly, sitting here with me today, and probably some watching on the screen, and we greatly appreciate the support that this body would show with the encouraging news that you will be supporting pay parity both at the state level, but also in addition to what the governor said relative to the 2-step increase beyond what he's offering other state workers. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And if I could add on to the real quick, Chief of Staff Teresa Benitez-Thompson through Chair Moreno to Assemblyman Hafen, if there's specific work that this body would like us to do, then or more work in a specific area, then the new positions would probably have to be contemplated. There are no new positions that are awarded in GovRec, and then you see that we're advocating. So once again, we enforce the laws that you pass and the policies you pass. So if there's greater work there, then there might have to be some consideration for what that support is, and then a way to get us there, quite frankly. If I could go back to the last question, just that Senator Dondera Loop was asking, if that's okay, because I think some of those questions around the use of those court assessments and bigger thinking or long-term thinking about those court assessments being replaced with general fund. So at present, our office is fine with that adjustment because we are being made whole with the general fund coming in to replace those court assessment funds. But that was not anything that we proposed through the budget process from our office. So we'll be watching with you folks, I think, as time goes on about how that might play out.
Thank you so much. We have 2 more questions. I'll go to Assemblywoman Dickman, and then we'll end with Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the opportunity for a question. My question is about the legal secretaries. Did you say they have not had a raise in like 22 years? 2001?
Aaron Ford, for the record, yes, since 2001, absent a COLA, there has not been a pay increase for that classification of employee, our legal secretaries.
So I'm just wondering, why has it been requested in the past and denied, or is the only way to get this increase through changing the classification, or?
Thank you, Teresa Benitez-Thompson, Chief of Staff for Attorney General Ford, through Chairman Moreno to Assemblywoman Dickman. The request has been made quite a few times under different attorney generals, and so for those folks who have been in the building long enough that not the first time you've heard it, I think that we're much more at a pressing point right now as time goes on. Obviously, the difference between what the pay is and then the actual expenses of current day are grown and exaggerated, but it would take the dollars and the authority of this body through action in order for us to do that, which is what we're seeking.
So it's become more urgent even.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblyman Watts?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I had a question, kind of going back to some of the questions that Chair Dondera-Loop was asking around E816 and the ombudsman position. So, you provided a lot of, I think, comprehensive information about some of the staffing challenges and some of the analyses that have been done to other positions and remaining competitive with them. Did you also do a kind of workload analysis for this ombudsman position compared to some of the other ombuds people in the state? And and does this position have a similar workload to some of those other positions?
So Teresa Benitez Thompson through Chair Monroe Moreno to Assemblyman Watts. So in short answer, yes, for each one of these items that we've asked for, included some that were funded and included in GovRec, like this one. There's kind of a whole memo of multiple pages with great justification why. I know that's not necessarily something that you might see on your end. It is something that I believe the GFO's office has, as well as I believe LCB staff gets those as well. And so, but we can highlight some of that for you. But for everything we asked for, we think we put together really time-intensive arguments for support for them, including that piece as well.
Aaron Ford, for the record, if I could just augment, I just want to say substantively, Nicole Riley, who is my ombudsman, is doing I got goosebumps thinking about this. She's doing such important work and so much work. She's my ombudsman for sexual assault, for domestic violence, for sex trafficking. I mean, imagine the burden that she carries home every night relative to the exposure she has to this on a constant and consistent basis. She's also the chairperson who oversees my committee on domestic violence. And there's so much that she does. And she, if we could have gotten more money out of this, I think she certainly deserves it. And so I just kind of want to say it out loud that Nicole Riley is a person who's been doing great work in this area, and I'm proud to stand here and support what we're requesting for her in this budget.
Thank you for that. It sounds like that workload is definitely commensurate and maybe depending above and beyond. So I appreciate that, and thank you for the question, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And that was our last question. I would like to remind members that any of the budgets that have been included in staff closings, you will have an opportunity to ask questions when we get to the closings. So you will have an opportunity to ask those questions. Thank you so much for the presentation today and the questions about your budget. And with that, we will close the hearing for the Attorney General's budget. And members, I know that we're running a little long today, but we will move on to the Agency of Nuclear Projects. And I thank you, the Executive Director, for your patience with me moving the schedule around. Good morning, and as soon as you're ready, you can proceed with Budget 1005.
For the record, Fred Dilger, Executive Director, Nevada Agency for Nuclear Projects. I'm joined by Dan Marlowe here from ASD. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I want to thank you for the opportunity to tell you about the agency activities and the status of the Yucca Mountain project. We've provided you with a presentation, and after these opening remarks, I may refer to several of the slides, but the slides are mostly for your reference. The agency provides policy support and advice to the Governor and the Commission on Nuclear Projects on topics related to nuclear waste and nuclear issues generally. We also continue the state's longtime opposition to the Yucca Mountain project. We accomplish our work with a small staff of state employees, our contracted external counsel, Egan, Malsh, Fitzpatrick, and Lawrence, and support from contractors on an as-needed basis. The agency also supports a small volcanology program at UNLV and a seismic program at UNR. The agency budget has been at the same level for a number of years. The agency also assists the Governor and the Attorney General's office on nuclear matters as needed. This was especially true when we discovered that the Department of Energy had shipped surplus weapons plutonium to the Nevada National Security Site without informing the state. The agency staff and contract legal team assisted the AG's office in preparing legal arguments that led to an agreement for the DOE to remove the plutonium. That removal was completed last September. The Yucca Mountain project is not dead, but remains in limbo. When the Yucca Mountain site was originally chosen as the nation's only location for the disposal of spent nuclear fuel, the state of Nevada evaluated the technical merits of the site and concluded that the program would be unsafe for the state. With a bipartisan consensus, Nevada has effectively resisted development of the site since 1987. Constant effort is required to prevent resumption of the Yucca Mountain project. Commercial spent fuel is the expended fuel rods used to power nuclear power plants at 54 sites around the United States. The highly radioactive spent fuel rods withdrawn from nuclear reactors are safely stored at power plant sites in 35 states. The U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC, has determined that this commercial spent fuel can continue to be safely stored where it is right now for decades. There is no nuclear waste at Yucca Mountain. There are no facilities for storing or disposing nuclear waste at Yucca Mountain. There is no railroad to move the waste to Yucca Mountain. There is a 5-mile-long tunnel that was drilled for research purposes and a chain-link fence. Yucca Mountain would need a license from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission before a repository could be constructed. In 2008, the Department of Energy filed a deeply flawed license application with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and the NRC's legal process began. Our contracted legal team, with excellent support from the AG's office, has enabled Nevada to effectively navigate the complex NRC legal process. In 2009, the NRC administrative law judges admitted more than 200 Nevada contentions challenging the safety of the Yucca Mountain site, an unprecedented event. The DOE asked to withdraw the license in 2010. But the federal court found in 2013 ordered NRC to continue the proceeding. Neither the NRC nor the Department of Energy have sufficient funds to engage in the licensing proceeding, which would cost billions of dollars and take at least 5 years. Congress has not appropriated any money for the licensing proceeding since 2011. NRC suspended the proceeding due to a lack of funding, but the license application remains pending. The situation is deeply unfair to the state of Nevada. On September 26, 2022, the state of Nevada, in coordination with the Attorney General, State Congressional Delegation, LCB, and the Governor's Office, filed a motion before the NRC for the specific purpose of trying to end the deadlock. We requested the proceeding be reopened for the specific purpose of hearing 3 motions that could result in dismissal of the license application. There is no disagreement between Nevada and the Department of Energy about the motions, so there's no disagreement over the facts. We calculated that the NRC has sufficient carryover funds to hear our motions. If we're successful, it's possible that the Yucca Mountain license could finally be dismissed. If we're unsuccessful, the state's legal position is not harmed. As directed by our commission, the agency continues to work aggressively to find a policy solution that protects Nevada but also serves the national interest. No state should be forced to accept a nuclear waste repository without its consent. Last week, Nevada's congressional delegation reintroduced the Nuclear Waste Informed Consent Act to implement a consent-based siting facility process. Next week, I'll be at a conference in Phoenix where I'll hear about the programs in Germany, France, Great Britain, Sweden, and other nations. All of those nations have changed course to adopt consent-based siting in spent fuel storage and disposal. Alone among the Western democracies, the United States remains stuck with an outdated and unworkable program. The Yucca Mountain program stands in the way of progress on this issue. With your continued support, the agency will continue to protect Nevada and advocate for a workable process that will serve the national interest. We're happy to provide you with a personal briefing anytime. I'm joined by Belinda Evenden, our technical programs administrator, and We're happy to reach out and provide you any information you'd like at any time. And with that, I'll answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Well, that was short and sweet. I like that. Members, do you have, sure, Senator Gokachia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And of course, I have a long history with Yucca Mountain going clear back to my county days. But there were 3 counties, I believe, that had contentions. And I believe your office is still helping those or support this. It was Esmeralda, Lincoln, and maybe White Pine that 3 contentions had standing. And I'm just wondering if you what the status was.
Sure. What happened was, Fred Dilger, for the record, the whole proceeding remains in limbo. So those contentions still exist, but nothing's been done with them. And so now we are in this absurd situation where they have a license application. The Department of Energy does not want to pursue the license application. The courts have told the Department of Energy, no, you have to pursue the license application. And Congress has not voted any money to do anything with it. So now, in terms of policy discussion about moving forward with managing this waste, there's an out. People can say, well, there's Yucca Mountain out there hanging out there. So it will never be built. It's widely recognized it will never be built. And yet we still have this lingering process.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, members. Any other questions? Senator Ganser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've been very focused on fighting Yucca Mountain for years. Have we done any work, or do you have any updates, and this may not be within your scope, about like reprocessing, other alternatives? So not just talking about fighting Yucca Mountain, but saying there's other ways to manage nuclear waste now. Do we work on that at all?
Fred Dilger, for the record. We have examined this closely because this is one of these issues that pops up every now and again. For reprocessing in Nevada, it's not practical because you need a lot of water. And basically, when you reprocess fuel, you take the spent fuel rods, you dip them in acid, and you melt the zirconium alloy tube that it's in, and then you have a lot of radioactive acid. And then you can extract the uranium from that. So the bottom line is it's a very expensive process, very water intensive, and uranium is cheap and it's readily available. And so it's not really an economical issue. I'll give you an example. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission held hearings 2 years ago about a proposed revamp of its reprocessing regulations. And only one industry person showed up at the webinar, and they concluded they have no interest, and they indicated they have no interest in doing reprocessing.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. And, just to be clear, I wasn't asking whether we should be doing that in Nevada. I was just asking where, what was happening on that front. So I appreciate the explanation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the answers to the questions. I don't see any other members who have any questions, so I will thank you again for the presentation, and thank you for your patience with me in doing our agenda for the day.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So members, with that brings us to the end of our budget hearings for today. And our next item on our agenda would be public comment. We will start public comment here in Carson City. And if you would like to dial in for public comment, I ask that you dial 888-475-4499 and then press 8977386747 and press pound if you'd like to call in for public comment. I will remind anyone with public comment that we were limited to just 2 minutes so that we make sure we have time for everyone to speak. We'll start here in Carson City, go to Las Vegas, and then to the phone lines. Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Co-Chairs and members of these committees and staff. I'll make it quick. I know you've got other things to do. My name is Rick McCann, representing the Nevada Association of Public Safety Officers and the Nevada Law Enforcement Coalition. You've heard the Attorney General's office outline the need for pay parity for his criminal investigators and the need for the parity to be applied in his current budget. I echo those sentiments, and I'm here today to offer my support. I represent the AG investigators, have for a number of years. And unfortunately, public comment at these presentations is the only way I can get my point across. So here you go. As stated in the presentation, the Attorney General Criminal Investigator Series receives a lower pay grade than all other criminal investigators positioned within the state of Nevada. This disparity has a direct impact on the agency's ability to recruit, hire, and retain qualified criminal investigators. AG investigators involve a host of complex financial fraud schemes, specifically within insurance fraud, mortgage fraud, Medicaid fraud, workers' compensation fraud, consumer fraud, and other complex financial crime programs. AG and criminal investigators, whether you know it or not, they involve guardianship and elder abuse and financial exploitation cases, tobacco enforcement, missing children, high-tech crimes, human trafficking, internet crimes against children, opioid provider crimes, state employee crimes, public integrity, which we've talked about here today, and a wide variety of conflict cases referred from local jurisdictions. They do a lot of stuff. I hope everybody here is aware of that. I am, because as I said, I represent them. Investigators are then expected to testify in court regarding their investigative work. This means that AG criminal investigators must have a wide breadth of knowledge of criminal law and mastery in most complicated subject matters that we have in this state. Again, obtaining pay parity is, without question, the most cost-effective way to recruit, train, and retain quality employees, establish an experienced staff of investigators, improve the quality of work, efficiency levels, and morale. Make no mistake, this is not a simple request for a pay raise that some believe can be remedied simply through collective bargaining. It's a need to achieve basic parity with all other criminal investigators who are earning 2 and sometimes more pay grades higher than the AG criminal investigators. We must correct this pay parity inequity by increasing their base pay to be on par with other criminal investigators in this state. Oh, and by the way, I ditto AG Ford's recommended increases for legal secretaries and other staff. I spent 40-plus years before my retirement as a litigator. They are vital to the instrument that you're talking about here with the AG's office. Do not forget them as well. Thank you for consideration.
Thank you so much for your comments. Is there anyone else here in Carson City that would like to make public comment? And you can go ahead and fill in all the chairs. I remind you to turn the mic on, state your name for the record, and we have 2 minutes.
Alice Kaufman, Supervising Legal Secretary, employed by the Office of the Attorney General. I'm here today on my own personal time. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and not as a representative of the Attorney General's office. The legal secretaries are asking for a reclassification of 2 to 4 grades increase for the positions of Legal Secretary 1, Legal Secretary 2, Supervising Legal Secretary, and Legal Office Manager. Why? Because there is a measurable difference between a legal secretary and a highly skilled legal assistant. It takes knowledge, expertise, and education to perform these duties. We need to hire and retain the best. The skills include assisting in complex litigation, including jury instruction, voir dire, discovery, proficient in filing in the Nevada Supreme Court, Ninth Circuit Court, United States Supreme Court, compliance with Blue Book, competent in the rules of Nevada civil procedure and appellate procedure, federal rules of civil procedure and appellate procedure, administrative law. Our deputies carry an extremely high caseload. Having the best attorneys makes a difference for the people of this state. Having the most highly trained and qualified legal assistants keeps these deputies available to give the sound legal advice that state agencies need. This legal advice is crucial in keeping the occurrence of litigation down and thus liability in check. This last week, the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners approved restructuring and job classifications compensation. The job evaluation was 20 years overdue. Chair Hartig said it's, and I quote, "It's so important to stay on top of these studies, to stay competitive, and to retain the best and the brightest." Our last job classification was in 2001, the same year I started with the Attorney General's office over 22 years ago. It is crucial to retain the best and the brightest, highly trained staff. It is imperative that the deputies have the best legal assistants assisting them. I advocate for these great increases. I strongly encourage the legislators in this committee to grant the budget items advocated for Attorney General Aaron Ford, as these proposals are in the best interests of the state. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You can go ahead.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Mackenzie Hodges, and I am standing in front of you today on behalf of myself and my staff members. I'm a legal office manager with the Attorney General's office, where I have been employed for 4 years and 9 months. I'm here in support of the reclassification for the Attorney General Legal Secretary Series, as previously presented to you by Attorney General Ford. The request advocates for reclassification of the entire series and for meaningful salary increases. The last time the state of Nevada legal secretaries received a salary increase, you'll hear it again, was in 2001, 22 years ago. Since that time, the cost of living has drastically increased. The current annual salary of the legal secretary 2 is $40,340.16. Based on the aforementioned income for a single individual, ever-increasing PERS contributions, PEB health premiums, and after taxes, the annual take-home salary in 2022 was $27,721.96. I hope that those of you sitting before me today can agree that less than $28,000 in annual income is by no stretch of the imagination a livable wage. Please, let me be clear that these positions are not entry-level positions. The diligent public servants holding these positions possess very specialized skill sets. Many of them have completed secondary education courses, hold bachelor's and associate's degrees, have completed many field-specific certificate programs, and have many years of extremely valuable experience and institutional knowledge, some with over 20, 30, and 40 years of experience. These are the same individuals that sit across from me at my desk with tears in their eyes and tell me they have not bought groceries in days. They just picked up their second and third jobs, and they begged me to approve them for outside work. They're asking their adult children to help them make rent and make sure that their mortgages aren't foreclosed on. I welcome anybody to look these individuals in serving our state in the eye and tell them that they are earning an adequate and fair livable wage, especially for the skill set and experience they possess. Our hope is that you will review and consider the materials submitted to you by Attorney General Ford and my colleagues that illustrate how the work of the legal secretaries in the Attorney General's office execute specialized duties and tasks to set them apart from legal secretaries and other state agencies. Please let me be clear, we are not asking for extravagant salary increases. We are merely requesting that the 40 to 55% gap between our wages and those of our counterparts in local government agencies be narrowed.
Thank you so much for your comments. Go ahead.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Sandy Geyer, and I'm here to support Attorney General Ford's proposed amendment to the budget for the reclassification of legal secretaries. By supporting this important and necessary amendment, it will allow for the favorable recruiting of talented legal assistants and provide a career path for advancement. The average cost for training a legal secretary working for the Attorney General's office is between $5,000 and $10,000 per employee, then only to have them leave a year or so afterwards for higher pay and less responsibilities in the legal community. We have amazing employees who often put their job first, but when we continue to When we continue to have the inability to recruit and hire qualified applicants, as good as this staff is, it further compounds the frustration and resentment when they are asked to continue to take on more and more responsibility for no additional compensation. You know, our legal secretaries, again, are paid at 40 to 55% less than our peers in other state public employers, such as the county, the cities throughout the state. The sad truth is, we are among the working poor. Without skilled legal assistance, our office will be strained even further in providing support to other state agencies and the public. Today, let's change the future for these dedicated public servants and provide for the future for the state of Nevada by offering compensation worthy to attract the best and the brightest of applicants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies, for your comments. Is there anyone else here in Carson City that would like to make public comment? Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sean Gallagher. I'm the president of the Nevada State Law Enforcement Officers Association. I'm now off duty. Some of you might have seen me earlier in the auditorium. I was on duty at the time, but I've removed myself from duty and I secured all of my police equipment. I'm here speaking as the president and also as a person who's concerned for state employees. I'm going to make this quick because I don't want to beat this dead horse, but you guys have heard it. As it sits right now, the Attorney General's office is basically a sinking ship. And thanks to the Attorney General and his administration, they've managed to keep it afloat. I heard a retired military officer once say, "You're asking us to do more and more with less and less. Eventually, we're going to be doing everything with nothing." And that's where we're at right now. This is not sustainable. This has got to change. I don't know any other way to do it. The employees have been patient. Forgive me, I had to run back over here so I get here for public comment. I don't know any other way to fix this than through you guys. That's the only way that it's going to get done. The politics always gets in the way. The bureaucracy always gets in the way. So I'm hoping this time it will work in our favor. Somebody just needs to step in. I'm hoping that it's this group here that will say, look, we can't keep kicking this can down the road because the mass exodus is here. I'm here to tell you. If I'm being completely honest, I'm there myself. If it doesn't go right after this season and after union negotiations and all that stuff, I can't stay in state service. That would be a disservice to my family. At this point in my career, eventually I have to consider myself and my kids, my wife. And I can't do this. It's not sustainable. The AG investigators were 2 grades below every other state investigator. Secretary of State has investigators. DMV has investigators. All of them are 2 grades above. And my understanding is that it's just administrative in nature because the bureaucracy, it just won't get out of the way to allow that equity to occur. Please just be that mechanism. Please be that tool. Just step in and say, no more politics, no more bureaucracy. Let's just fix this retention problem that we have. And it's plaguing. It's a plague throughout the entire state, particularly the public safety and law enforcement services. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for your comments. I see no one else here in Carson City for public comment. We'll move down to Las Vegas. If you go ahead and turn on your microphone, state and spell your name for the record and any affiliation that you're here with, and you have 2 minutes for your public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Henry Thorns. HenryThorns. I come here on my own. I agree with majority of everyone have just spoken. And I don't understand because Las Vegas is getting 50 billion, something like that, through casino gambling, through all this gambling that's coming to Las Vegas. It's where that funding going? That funding should be able to help some of these attorney general office peoples to get help, through the gambling revenues. And not only that, I understand $28,000 a year is way below. It's like $16,000 for African Americans. So, we need to work on that also, because How are we going to survive? We almost homeless right now. One for chap, we will be homeless. You know, so it would be a whole, I think Nevada needs to just regroup and come in as one instead of coming in divided, change this system to help everybody. You know, we have a great attorney general in their office. They're great. They're doing a great job. You know what I'm saying? And I appreciate them. If I had the money, I'd pay them. But what I want to really get at is workers' comp. I believe workers' comp need to be investigated because I've been hurt since 1993, and I'm still fighting 30 years of workers' comp, fake doctors, fake judges, and fake insurance companies that deny injured workers benefits or treatment. And that's what brought me down here today, to explain what have been happening to me. That's why I ran for governor. That's why I ran for county commissioner, so we can put an end to this workers' comp fraud where you're supposed to be getting treatment, but they fighting you through their attorney, which attorney own part of the workers' comp system. You know, so it's double dipping, and people like me is being left out on the streets, hurt, can't get no treatment, no benefits, nothing. So imagine me, you know what I'm saying? So I come here to support Aaron Ford 100. And I just hope the governor, I hope the legislator look into workers' comp. Because I'm a perfect example. I got rear-ended on the freeway in a company car. And I still can't get treatment. I still can't get benefit. Even though the doctors is telling them, open this man's case, open this case. I open my case, before you know it, the judge is denying me. Now imagine this. My case went from 2009 to 2023. No help. No benefits. I got hurt in 1993. Rear-ended on the freeway company car. So all I'm saying is investigate workers' comp. And Medicaid, you know, Medicaid is always asking.
Mr. Thorns, I hate to interrupt you, but you've reached your time limit. Actually, you've
Okay.
gone over your time limit. If you have any other comments, if you'd like to submit that to us in writing, we would love to receive it. And I thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else there in Las Vegas. I would like to make public comment. BPS, do we have anyone on the phone lines wishing to make public comment today?
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers wishing to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you so much. So with that, we've come to the end of our agenda. Ways and Means members, I hate to tell you this, but we have a work session, so take a quick break. I'll meet you downstairs in about 10, 15 minutes, and we'll get that started before our floor session. And this meeting is adjourned.